Hello, my name is Susan Norris and I'm the Assessment Coordinator for Forsyth County Schools. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about the Georgia Milestones assessment system, in particular about the scores and reports that you will be receiving any day now. We're going to kind of focus on the Georgia Milestones scores results and what the results are used for, and then talk a little bit about the achievement levels, the score types, talk about promotion retention, and then if you have any questions, the staff will be able to answer your questions after the video. So let's talk a little bit about the uses of the Georgia Milestones results. The Georgia Milestones assessment system results are used for communicating student achievement to parents, as state testing always has been in the past. It's used for to determining grade promotion in 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 8th grade, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move into the presentation. At high school, it's used for 20% of the final course grade, and also for accountability purposes for CCRPI, which is the measure of how well schools are performing, and then TEKS and LEAKS, which is the teacher and leader evaluation system. It's a signal for whether students are ready for the next level, whether it's grade, college, whether it's grade or course or college or career. And I do want to point out that the scores that you will be receiving very shortly are scores from last year, from 2014 and 2015. Any of the scores from that year will be used to calculate CCRPI and TEKS and LEAKS, but it's a hold harmless year, so that means that the scores won't officially count, but they will be calculated for what if the scores counted. This is what it would have looked like. Okay. There have been lots of questions. I've talked to different parents and teachers across the county, and there have been questions and concerns about students taking the test online and students taking the test paper pencil, and did one or the other group have any advantage. And the state has they've initiated two different types of assessment, two different types of analysis. They've done a forensic analysis where they analyzed each test question, and they've to see if there was a scoring difference in how well students answered the question online or paper pencil. And then they've also done a mode comparability study, again another way of analyzing students' results, paper pencil versus online. And I am happy to say that both of these analyses revealed that there were no significant differences whatsoever whether the students took the test paper pencil or online. Okay, let's talk a little bit about achievement levels and types of scores. When you look at the reported information that you're going to get an achievement level, a scale score, and then we'll talk a little bit about that mean scale score, talk about domain signals. You now will get some information about your student's national percentile and national percentile rank, and then we'll get a Lexile measure and a Lexile range. And we're going to go ahead and talk about each one of these areas. So an achievement level, no longer do we have the student did not meet, meets, or exceeds. The new assessment system is all about what the student knows. So we really want to, the state came up with achievement levels. Your student will either get a beginning learner, developing learner, proficient learner, or a distinguished learner in each of the content areas: English language arts, math, science, or social studies. If your student has a score of beginning learner, that means that the student really had difficulty with mastering the standards, and the student will need significant support at that next level, whether it be grade or course. If your student has a score of developing learner, the student has partial proficiency. They have mastered some standards, but they still are struggling with some other standards, and some support will be needed at the next level of instruction. Proficient learner, the student understands the standards, they've mastered the standards, and they're ready for that next level. And then distinguished learner, the student has mastered the standards and to the point where for the next level may need enrichment and acceleration. You will also get a scale score, which is a number that's associated with that achievement level. It's a mathematical transformation from that raw score, okay? And when we look at the sample student reports, we'll talk a little bit more about that mean scale score. But remember that the mean scale score is an average of the set scale scores. So let's take a look at a chart here. When we say this, you take the raw score and turn the raw score into a scale score. I don't understand all the statistical psychometrics, but I trust that the experts do. So your student will, take the raw score, turn it into a scale score. And then that scale score will determine the achievement level. So for example, in all grade levels and all content areas, if a student's scale score is below 475, that student will get an achievement level of beginning learner. If the student scores somewhere between 475 and 524, they will get a developing learner score. If they score somewhere between 525, and then it varies to distinguish, but 525 until one below this next number, they will be proficient, and then you'll see the distinguished cut scores. So these are called cut scores. They're the same for developing proficient, but they do vary in distinguished learner depending on the course or the content. So let's look at a couple examples quickly. For the ELA, if a student received a scale score of 470, we can look over here at the chart and see 470 is below developing learner cut score, so that student would have gotten a beginning learner. For math, if a student scored a 550, we could look here and see 550 is more than 525, and so they would, but less than all of these distinguished levels, so they are in the proficient cut score area. So you won't have to figure this out. You'll get a scale score, and you'll also get the achievement level on the individual student report. You're also going to get some domain signals, and a domain is a specific content area with, a specific group of standards that have similar traits within a content area. So in our English language arts assessment, our students will get a reading status. No longer do we have that reading test. So the students will have a domain level of below grade level or on or above grade level in reading. And that level is determined by their Lexile score. So then there will also be some information about writing. Remember, with this new Georgia Milestones assessment, that students not only were reading and answering multiple choice questions, but there was a large writing component as well. So you'll get some information on your students writing with ideas and organization, how they use their language and conventions within their writing, and then you'll get some information about how well they did on narrative writing, and they'll use rubric scores for to share that information. Math, science, and social studies is a little bit easier. For each of the domain areas, there may be 4 or 5 in each content area. You will either get an indicator of your student needs to remediate learning, which means they have some skills gaps and they need some extra help, or monitor learning. The student did okay, but just keep an eye on them. Or accelerate learning. The student understands that domain and they are ready for the next level. There's also a national percentile rank, and the student will get a number from 1 to 99, and that national percentile rank is an indicator, a barometer, a check, if you will, of how well your student did in that content area compared to other students across the nation. Now, normally you get a national percentile rank from an achievement test. What the state of Georgia did is they just pulled 20 questions from the Terra Nova achievement test. So that national percentile rank is just a check. It's not to be used to place students in any type of programs or to evaluate teachers in any way. It's just part of a test. So in Georgia, we can start comparing how well our students do to other students across the nation. The Lexile measure, you'll get a Lexile measure, and we've had these Lexile measures in the past with CRCT, and that's really kind of a standard score that measures the student's reading ability with their difficulty of text. And then you'll also get a Lexile range, and this Lexile range will give you an indicator of what type of level of book your student should be reading, from a kind of readable, easy, leisurely at the beginning of the level to a more challenging, motivating reading at the end of the level. And the Lexile measure is very important because that determines that domain signal of whether your student was below level in reading or on or above level. Now let's look at how all this ties into promotion retention requirements for, as per the state board rule. All right, remember in reading I said you had a domain score of either below level or on or above level. Well, the Lexile measure that your students get based on how they performed on the 3 sections of the English Language Arts test will give them a Lexile measure. And we have bands that will help us determine if students were below level or on level. Okay, so when your student gets that Lexile measure, what the state's going to do is they're going to look at this Lexile stretch bands to determine if the student is below level or on or above. So for example, let's take a look at a 3rd grade student. This is the band for the 3rd grade student. If a 3rd grade student received 520 or above, then that student in the reading domain will get a score of on or above grade level. If the student received a 519 or below, that student would get an indicator of below level on the reading domain. Now, that's very important because that's tied to promotion retention rule. So for 3rd graders and 5th graders, students have to get a 520 or above or an 830 or above to meet that promotion retention requirement for reading. If the student scores 519 or below, or in 5th grade an 829 or below, those are the students who will need to have remediation and who will need to take the English Language Arts retest at the end of the school year. Now, the scores you'll be getting back were for last year, so that doesn't affect the scores you'll be getting back in the next couple days. This pertains to the April assessment that we'll take at the end of the year. Okay, math is a little bit simpler. For math, if the student scores in 5th grade, if the student scores at the beginning learner achievement level, those are the students who will need to retake the test. Okay, now let's take a look at a sample of a report. So you will be getting a little booklet report as opposed to a one-page report because you're really going to get a lot of information about your student. So it certainly will help you and it will help the teachers and help the schools as well. This is an example of an individual student report, and you'll notice this would be the front page, and right away you'll get information about all of the content areas. You'll see English Language Arts, Math, Science, and Social Studies. Then there'll be that achievement level, whether the student was proficient, whatever that achievement level was, beginning, proficient, developing, or distinguished. And then you'll see the scale score down on the bottom. Remember, the scale score is the score that determines what achievement level the student will receive on the test. So there's kind of your snapshot. And then down here are descriptors of what each achievement level means. We talked about that in a few slides back. Then you're going to get a page for each content area. So this is English Language Arts, and you'll see again that achievement level and the scale score. And then over here it's kind of blurry and you can't see it, but there are 2 domains. The reading and vocabulary, this is where it'll say whether the student is below or on or above grade level. And then this is where you'll see the information about the writing and the language. The new piece of information that we now have on our reports is that you're going to see how the comparison of your student compared to the mean scale score of the students in the school, of the students in the system, and of the students in the state of Georgia as well. Remember, we said that mean scale score is the average. So if you took all of the students in 3rd grade who took the test at Chestatee Elementary and you added up all of their scale scores and then divided it by the total number of students, that's how you get your mean scale score. So you can take a look and see your student compared to the average of the students in the school, again, and in the system and in the state. Then here's that national percentile that we were talking about. The national percentile, this individual student received a 60. So what that means is, compared to other students in the similar peer group, this student scored better than 60% of the students, and there were 40% of the students who scored better than this student. And then there's this range, a national percentile range means if the student would take these types of questions again at any given time, they would score within this range. And here's that Lexile measure that we talked about. Remember, that Lexile measure determines whether the student is below or on or above grade level, and that determines promotion retention for 3rd and 5th grade students. And this math indicator for 5th grade students, if it's beginning learner, those are the students who would need to retest. And then down here you get some Lexile information, some types of books that would be good for your child to read in their Lexile range. So lots of information. You'll have a page like this for math, science, and social studies as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit again about score uses. I want to just remind you again that for the 2015-2016 school year, when the students take the test in April, that we will be using the results to determine promotion retention for reading in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade if you have a middle school student, and for math in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade, and that we will be using the scores to determine the school's their scores for CCRPI, which is the School and System Accountability Measure, and TEACS, which is the Teacher Evaluation System, and LEAPS, which is the Leadership Evaluation System. There will be a score interpretation guide that the state will provide for us to help you understand your scores a little bit more, and that will be available actually very shortly, probably. It's to be published online in October. I have the high school student score interpretation guide ready, but I haven't seen the end of course grade yet. But probably by the end of November or beginning December, the end of grade score interpretation guide will be available for you. And I'll let the schools know, and then they can post it on their school website. All right, and thank you very much for listening. And now if you have any questions, you can speak to the administration. Have a nice day.